listeners. This is F. Molina, and I got, today I'm with two Pablos, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Isn't that a movie or a show?
We're
Two
in
Escobares. I know that's a different one.
Yes.
We're in for a special treat.
And this is the Two Pablo show, right?
I think so. Well, one Pablo
we're
would say
calling
that
it?
it's the one Pablo show, and then maybe like a sidekick Pablo or something.
Yeah. So we are joined today by Pablo J. Almaguer.
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 Oh my God, you gave me a French accent.
You know
man.
what? I saw
God,
that,
you're
and
terrible
I
at
just
this.
wanted to hear how you pronounced it.
Almaguer.
I wasn't sure. I
What was it
I
again?
went to law school at Texas Tech. Remember that? I had a lot of Morans and Rodriguez and you.
Slowly losing
what else?
votes here, man. Just like
You went to school all in the valley before that, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Almaguer.
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 It's going to do the voitiere.
And of course, we have Victoria with us.
Hi, guys.
So Pablo, you are running for state bar president, right?
yeah, I think the proper title is president-elect. You start off as president-elect, but you end up being president.
Okay,
yeah.
well, why does that happen? Why are you like president-elect and then?
It's a 3-year term, and I think the way the state bar does it is for sort of like training purposes. There's so much to learn and do and kind of gear up for once you actually get elected that you are president-elect, learning from the president, and then you move on to that, and then you end up becoming immediate past president. There's enough to do along the way, and I think it's for that. It's for like 3 different leaderships, but also to kind of learn along the way. TYLA has the same kind of to Texas Young Lawyers Association for those that are uninitiated.
Uninitiated.
Yeah, and all these terms I'm going to
I
throw
feel
out.
like maybe
think
like in our
he's-
actual like politics, we should have a president-elect who does some training, and then later on they take on the presidency.
That would be wise. That would be.
That's an American.
That's an American.
Sorry.
So what does the state bar elect president do, or the state bar president once you become?
Well, you know, they're the figurehead for the state bar. So there's 107,000 licensed attorneys, and if there's an issue that's going to be affecting the bar, the president, the president-elect has some duties, but the president is going to be the one that's going to be responding and be the answering for all those matters, along with an incredible amount of appointments and other administrative duties that are involved. Any kind of committee, any kind of section appointment, well, section is elected, but committee appointments, and they're in the hundreds. That's all done by the president. The board leadership, to a certain extent, is also kind of involved. The chair of the board, actually, the one that does a lot of that. So there's a lot of administrative work and a lot of professional oversight work done for the state bar.
What made you want to run for this position?
Well, several different reasons. Once you'll see, and you'll have a brochure here in front of you, and I'm sure people can look it up at some of the qualifications. But you can go to www.voteforpablo2020.com.
Nice
I feel
plug.
like you like that.
Like that.
You should put it on the screen too. by the
we
way, when
will.
I say that.
We
Yeah,
will.
so-
We will.
Yeah, but with my voice and my accent, you might need some closed captioning anyway, so might as well do that. But
You got a great voice for radio.
Pablo
my
has a
friend.
great voice.
Did you
It's
like it?
Yes,
yeah.
yes. If they still, like I said earlier, if they still have like Midnight Magic running on one of the local radio stations, definitely get this
If you don't
guy.
get elected, we got to get you on 104.
Yeah.
Definitely.
yeah, no, let me tell you, I'm so glad that my dating life ended when Skype came about, because this video came on. I'm like, oh, forget the face. This guy's old voice. No, but you know what? You asked about the reason for that. But I mean, if you look, there's a lot of service that I did for the state bar and the local bar. But every so often, they all call you after you have served on the board of directors, which is what I did. And there's a group that are asked if they want to run, and it's basically done by like a rotation based on board policy. So you look at the people from the bigger cities, and you look at the open, which is sort of mid-sized cities, and then the small cities, and there's that rotation every year, right? And so this year they looked at the small city candidates that have served on, or the people that served on the board, and they'll call me like every 2 or 3 years for that. And I'm kind of busy, as I was talking right now. I got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and that just takes a lot of my time. But this time it was a little different. There's a lawsuit filed against the State Bar of Texas for the mandatory status of it.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
And that is something that several of us at Legal Aid have been following for years now, because it's actually about one of like 6 or 7 different lawsuits around the nation. that are filed. And to give you like a real quick rundown of it, it's based on the Janus decision from the Supreme Court. And I'm going to get really too technical for y'all's audience. I don't know.
No. Our audience is lawyer. A lot of our audience are
when
lawyers.
When you said too technical, you pointed at Efrain like you're not going to understand
right?
this.
You're not going to understand all this legal jargon.
He's like, let me draw pictures. Let me draw some pictures.
I saw him snoring. I saw the eyes go up. I saw the wide eyeballs. And like,
no. This is exactly what we want to know.
Is that what you want? You want citations? But there is a Janus decision in the Supreme Court discussing the fact that you cannot have anybody take compulsory dues from membership, and I think that was actually a union. And then, basically run amok and do whatever you want with those dues. First Amendment issues are involved with that because you're forced to be part of that group. So that's for a union. And a lot of these, there's one law firm, it's filing suit in 6-7 different states, saying that if you have a compulsory bar where you have to pay your dues, then your First Amendment rights come into play based on Janus. And if you are somehow feel like they're not being respected or followed, or your philosophy isn't, and I'm simplifying the argument here, then you shouldn't be compelled to pay these dues. And for the most part, there's like 3 main arguments they bring up, and that's going to be the diversity initiatives by the bar, probably like pro bono assistance like it is here in Texas for like the folks over in the border and immigration matters, but also and always access to justice and support for legal services. So we've been following it as a legal aid attorney for a while because it's basically going after support for us and what we do. And so when it was filed against Texas and this call came about, I said, you know what, maybe it's time to be part of the narrative on this. Let me just put my name in there. You don't normally get picked like the first time around for an interview like this, but I was fortunate enough to be picked.
And how long have you been with Legal Aid?
21 years, that's all I've ever done.
Oh, wow.
When we say legal aid, we say it's actually Rio Grande Legal Aid, right?
Yeah, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid.
And what do they do for our listeners who don't know?
We are one of 3 major legal aid organizations in the state of Texas. There's Legal Aid of Northwest Texas from the Dallas region in north, Lone Star for Houston, and then for the southwest portion, it's Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. We provide free legal assistance to people who cannot afford it. They're based on eligibility and poverty guidelines more than anything. So we provide free legal assistance to people that cannot afford it, mostly in the civil arena.
Okay.
And then what's the story behind Rio Grande, like Legal Aid? Because you guys have been behind some of the big right pushes down here, right? From Cesar Chavez to.
There has been actually, and I have to credit my former boss David Hall, and some of the folks. I mean, it just happened that it all just kind of at the same time was kind of created the UFW and other issues came about. Some riots happened down here, and TRLA was on top of that. Actually, back then it was Texas Rural Legal Aid. It was a much smaller organization. And our executive director, David Hall, and a few other people, back in the early 70s when this was that my internal voice or sound?
It was mine, I'm sorry.
Was it?
Oh, God, Sonny.
Are we done?
We're not.
Okay, good. I was like, man, that was quick.
My apologies.
I bored you all the time. Yeah, TRLA. But yeah, no, David Hall started up early on, and we were funded back in the 70s. It's part of the Great Society, and then it got funded through the Department of Justice. But it really didn't take off in the mid-70s. And that was here our director, David Hall, who retired recently, is proud to tell you that some of the litigation that he spearheaded created like a national restriction on the funds because it was, so much pushing the envelope about elections, about civil rights and other matters like that. And I think it was his vision, along with the people that he recruited. And it's not to say, to give myself certain status, but it is very hard to get a job at TRLA. Because you want to have somebody that's going to be dedicated and focused. And then that creates a certain amount of sort of like, not a pedigree, but a tradition to continue with aggressive litigation. So we continue to this day.
You said that y'all do primarily civil cases. So what kind of cases does that entail?
Everything. You can think of the top 4 civil areas in any legal aid organization you're going to ever see. It's going to be family law, public interest, consumer, and housing for sure. And then employment is also going to be up in the top 5. That's any legal aid organization.
And what people don't know about Pablo, and he won't toot his own horn, but Pablo, I have seen you in court, and I have seen you fight zealously, like arguing hard against judges, right? So, for his clients. And the craziest part is I see him argue zealously, and at the end of the day, I'm like, what type of case is this? I'm like, it's a pro bono case.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, you are fighting for these people who basically, you're not going to get like anything at the end of the day for yourself. It's just you're fighting for them, and that's what impressed me the most about you, Pablo. The dedication that you had on these cases that I saw you on. Like, wow, like if you're gonna fight that way for the pro bono person, thank goodness you're not working for ExxonMobil or some Fortune 500 company.
I don't know. Well, thank you. And actually, you want to tell more about that story, I'm sure, because I actually got into it with a judge, and I wouldn't say who it was, and you followed me, and I think she still was upset at me and took it out on you. So you came back to the next hearing, right, the next time around, and there you were again. You're like, please let me go first. I'm gonna do it. Okay. Yeah,
You know what?
I
That's always
remember.
awesome when you go into court and they're just like, you hear somebody doing some dumb shit, and you're like, I gotta make my announcement next, and they're gonna be in a bad mood.
That was me too.
Yeah, I was
appreciated
I was
it. I'm
right
sorry
next, but
about
I'm like, you know what? It's
You're like, I'm gonna come back when they've cooled down.
And no, she had no. Well, I already gave out the gender.
I was like,
so I'm
I
gonna
think
say-
we already know who you're talking about, Pablo.
Okay, and so and before I lose more votes, but thank you. I got to tell you, I mean, just to kind of follow up on that issue, and I want just something. I think many of us that work at TRLA have. You can think of it as maybe one of two ways. You are glad that you don't have to worry about the overhead, although your budgeting, your finances can get cut whenever the Congress wants to, and so you get to focus on your client and nothing more. But there's also the added stress. But for you, there's no option for your client, so you have to give it all. You have to be that for them. And then for me, at the end of the day, what I've liked, done it for 21 years, is that you practice what you learned in law school. It's not about let's kind of see what it'll bring in to me or what it'll give to another person. It's about the practice of law, like the application of the law to this case, and its purest sense, and that's actually kind of satisfying for me. Don't get me wrong, my girls are 9 and 6, and they're going to be a little older when they go to college. I have to probably sell out and go get a better job, right? That pays better. But for now, we're comfortable enough, and I think the quality of life to know that you do what you do for the right reasons is what's satisfying.
Yeah.
That's great.
And like, girls are expensive. You can ask Sunny about that.
I have too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. It's interesting that you say that, because we get tied up in quotas and meeting our quarters and making sure that we have enough to sustain our practice and payroll and what have you. And then there are times when I've looked at Ef'n and I go, I just want to be a lawyer, man. I feel like I'm just a glorified business manager right now.
My recruitment, I don't know if y'all ever attended to, when I do a CLE about pro bono recruitment, I actually mention that there is a business model of practicing law that really we have to look at. And I cannot recruit a pro bono attorney if I don't respect that. So if I'm going to take your time, I want to give you a case that's not going to take you away for too much, or at least give you the resources to kind of moving forward, directly. Because, the business model, we don't learn that in law school. I mean, that's something we have to pick up.
You learn that either by reading books, and even then, I try to read as many books as I can to pick up the things that I don't know. And even then, I still don't follow what the book tells you to do. I go and I screw it up myself, and then that's when I learn, right?
Yeah.
That's the best way to learn, though.
Like first year paying taxes, and you realize, I got double taxed. I got no money left. I'm going to have to figure this out.
That was my biggest fear when I left the district attorney's office. I always had this in the back of my head. Okay, not all of this money is my money. Part of it belongs to the IRS. Part of it, and so I was just so paranoid about it. And right now, this is tax season, so
That's exactly what happened for me the first year I left. I did the same thing as I'm going to put away, 35%, and it's going to sit there, and that's for the IRS. And I was so paranoid about it. And then somewhere down the line before tax season, I totally forgot that money was sitting there for the IRS. And then when they took it from me, I was devastated. I was just like, I needed that.
As long as you have an IOTA account, don't touch that, man.
Yeah, I know.
No, I'm just kidding.
Like, speaking of like money, what would, in your vision, Pablo, what would Texas look like if the plaintiffs in those cases are successful and
the mandatory bar one?
With the mandatory bar, and these mandatory bar fees aren't used to fund programs like
That's a good question.
TRALA, the Civil Rights Project?
That's a good question. I'm sure the bar is prepared, whatever the outcome might be. Right now, I think the case is based in federal court, and I think it'll be decided soon by summary judgment motions, and then moved over to the Court of Appeals. And the expectation is going to go to the Supreme Court, all 4 or 5 cases that are pending out there, to have one decision on it. Whichever way it goes, I'm sure, you have to follow the decision. But if it, you remain as is, you continue doing what you're doing, that's great, right? But if you don't, what will happen, honestly, is like a sort of a bifurcated process. If you look at Washington State, you'll see that where you have a very narrow definition what the State Bar Act does and what it should be doing. And so that would be, disciplinary matters, licensing, overview, of the profession. Everything else, TLAB, TOJI, projects diversity, pro bono work, access to justice is voluntary. So fees go to one, which is like the actual limited, interpretation, and everything else will support it as you can by voluntary bars. So what that means, Austin, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, they're going to have those programs. We're not, because we don't have the resources, to do that. And that's what's happening in some states out there. There's also another possibility, that if it goes too far, you might even have the disciplinary system also kind of being moved away from the State Bar Act and into legislative model, which happens in California. So your Supreme Court doesn't actually do the disciplinary process like a whole other body does, which is a little scary to think about.
What body does it in California?
I'm not sure who it is over there, but I think it is actually legislative. And so you would hear a lot of complaints about that because are they even, they're not required to be lawyers though, are they? I don't think the supervisory body is made up of all lawyers like it is here at Texas. So no, it's scary. And I only know this by somebody who we're having a discussion with, and he told me I'm licensed in California, and it is scary to see over there that there isn't the oversight you have here like the Supreme Court. We want to keep it under the Supreme Court here, at least the disciplinary side. That's an extreme interpretation,
Yeah, extreme views, we thought we'd never have to deal with them.
Pablo, for our listeners who aren't attorneys, why is it important to try to keep the state bar together?
I think I just kind of mentioned some of those things, the State Bar, and as you see in the brochure and the pamphlet, and if you go to the website again, you'll see that there's a lot of initiatives that you support that assist and help the public in general. Like, let me give you the example. Sure. You might have, I'm sure you have a national audience here, so I'm going to keep it local, though.
We're going to get there.
Yeah. There's a couple of guys in Reynosa that catches on. I'm like,
international now.
Like what? Pablo was on the show?
Actually,
JD, you have to add
Monterrey
subtitles.
Who listens, so it's international.
Nice.
Shout out to him.
It's my two cousins, man. I told them I'm going to be here, so they're going to check it out. So
so you know, Pablo, our last video got how many views?
2.2 thousand so far.
2.2 thousand.
Yes.
Yeah. So
how many were family? Do you know?
It's the episode that I'm not on, so I think we figured out what works.
And we asked very few questions.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, the guy who came in had a script that he wanted to talk about, so he just went after it. We let him.
Oh, I'm going hard to all my friends, man.
We let them.
Remember, I got a Wikipedia page.
So we're hoping to get at
Okay.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't even answered the last question, but I'll go to that one. Yeah.
How do you get on Wikipedia? Because we had this discussion.
Why has a Wikipedia page?
You
That's
are
big
under
time.
35, I'm assuming, right? All of you are here.
I'm
Especially
35.
you look like at least maybe under 30 for sure. You see that guy? See that
Stop
guy? You see that
it.
guy?
Oh,
No.
You guys got kids over there. Yeah,
He's just trying to get votes. I am 35, actually, though, Pablo.
I didn't know that.
One vote.
Wait, have your vote?
Can I vote right now?
Early and often, no. But it was Wikipedia. Yeah, so for you all, that matters a lot, right? The Wikipedia page. I didn't realize it was a big deal, but I've got a friend.
That's how we do all our research. You have to pay for Westlaw and Lexis.
it's not on Wikipedia. It didn't happen.
Right.
I'm telling you, yeah. I mean, like, Tony Pena. Do you all know Tony Pena? From San Antonio now. Mm-hmm. He's the one that's kind of like, yeah, man, you're on Wikipedia. And I was like, I was a licensed attorney for like some years and been pretty good at legal aid. And yeah, but you're on Wikipedia. That was a big deal, So, but what happened is that I have a friend, Samuel Cook, who grew up here in Edinburgh. Is actually a statistician over in Boston College now. And he got together, I don't know what he was creating, the UTPA Wikipedia page. He was putting it together because he was a UTPA graduate. And along the way, he actually put a few notable graduates, and in there created the one for me. And it just so happens that there were like 3 articles about me, Back I was chair of the board. Well, I was the first chair of the board from the Valley since like the 1950s or so. And then a few other articles came about. But I don't think he's updated it since then, so it's like 3 sentences now. It's like pretty sad. And then he died, something like that at the end. What's that?
But you're on Wikipedia.
It's a big deal.
It's
It
a
is
big deal.
Oh, yeah.
If I Google like Sonny's name, he's not on Wikipedia.
I'm not on Wikipedia.
How does that make you feel?
But I've heard that anyone can go on there and just change it up. Isn't that true? Is that true?
Yeah, until you go in. Yeah, apparently I can't do it, right? Because they'll know it's you. You got to be other editors, they call it. And but you can put it if enough of a committee decision is made, you can actually have false information on the person there. until you go on and correct it. And move
I had a
it.
friend
Yeah.
in law school whose hobby it was to try and get things changed on Wikipedia to mess with people. It was-
He was talking about, I guess it started because of noteworthy graduates from Pan Am. Are you on that page?
I am not on that page. I am so, but I'm not noteworthy though. I'm obscure.
You're a note.
Yeah,
You're a note.
yeah, they don't want me to affect their admissions. You know.
We were so noteworthy that they got rid of the UTPA. Now there's no longer in existence.
That's
so,
true. For all of those that don't
Notice
know,
it paid.
it's UTRGV now.
Yeah,
Yes.
back then it was UTPA, right?
Well, we just call it Pan Am.
It was UTPA, and then before then it was just
Pan
Pan
Am.
American.
Pan American.
It's Pan Am College, Pan Am University, UTPA.
So this brings up a really good question, Pablo. You graduated from Pan American,
That's right. Oh, UTPA.
UTPA,
was UTPA.
with what type of
Get it right.
degree?
Where'd that come from? These headphones really kind of sound weird, man. Like, it's like I got inside voices when I don't take medication. So
It was
none of these-
it was a little Billie Eilish moment.
I was thinking, did that really come out?
So yeah, I forgot what we're talking about. Oh, yeah, no. When I started, it was just gone from Pan Am to UTPA, and I graduated as a poli-sci major with a minor in philosophy, which I probably could have done a philosophy major, but I need to get to law school.
And then what law school did you graduate from?
Chicago, Kent. I applied outside of the state of Texas.
Chicago Kent University. That's a big time university.
Chicago, Kent. It's probably Illinois Institute of Technology, not Kent,
Yeah.
but Chicago, Kent. But it was back 20-some years ago when I started, was known because they had this fancy new thing called laptops to use.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was like the first, I don't know if you know, but the 3-year writing program was created by our law school in Chicago, Kent. That was out and then used by everyone. Yeah, sorry about that. Everything to do about
What
that.
year was that? I don't want to date you, but
Don't date them.
I don't know. I can tell you that we used the DOS-based word. No, just kidding. No,
nice.
I started law school 94. 94. It took me 5 years to finish undergrad because I was working full time. I'm the oldest, of 3, and we really couldn't afford to lose the income, so I had to work at the same time. It took me 5 years to do that. So 94.
So one of the biggest problems that we have, like down here, like Pablo, is we have so many talented people here in the Rio Grande Valley, but it seems like we export so much talent. People are born, raised here, they go off to school, and then they go someplace else. They work someplace else. Very few people that come out get a professional degree, like actually like come back.
Yeah.
What made you like
Not
wanna
leave or come back?
wanna come
from
back.
Chicago.
come back home?
This is gonna sound corny to you all, but you all might see again on the bio. I was born in Mexico, right? I was 5 when my parents moved over here. My parents to this day are monolingual Spanish speakers. My dad's a mechanic, my mom's certified nurse's assistant. I'm very appreciative, of having come to a country that's helped me and my siblings and my family succeed. And I give back in any way I can because of that to my community. I was surprised because nobody had ever done this before, to get a license to go to law school and graduate because, you've never seen that before. It happens and you're like, what can I do with this? Let me give back to the system, to the community that kind of helped me get here, which is the same reason I'm doing what I'm doing right now, running for state bar president. My profession is given, that wasn't the accent, by the way, it snuck out there. My profession has given a lot to me, so I want to give something back. I just believe in that. I'm going to leave the place, this world a little bit better than when I got here, and I think you do it by example, and that's me. For so far, that's been the philosophy. Again, mind you, once my girls get older and things get tougher, maybe I'll sell out and
change a
change.
little
Yeah,
bit.
What do you have in mind for then? Have you thought about it at all?
I don't know. It'll take over the world.
Take over the
Yeah,
world.
Pinky and the brain kind of
CEO
this
for
voice with this voice.
CEO for Exxon.
Go to AM radio because it's thriving.
Oh
That's
yeah. You would be a really good voice on that like radio show, like coast to coast, like AM.
You start your own podcast.
But you keep saying voice, not face. Yeah, I noticed what you
Well,
say. Yeah.
You're on video right now.
That's not good.
Right
That's
now.
But you
not-
know
there was
what?
a lot of
There's a
lighting.
lot of things that you could do to somebody's face.
Oh, yeah,
That's-
CGI,
But
we could-
your
We're gonna put
voice
heart
is your
emojis all
voice.
over you.
Yeah.
Your
Not mine.
voice is like that's not something that anybody could try to fake. Anybody that can try to mimic or anything like that. So I mean,
That's like the
It's
third
spot
time you
on.
thought of it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean,
You know what? That'd be really
blushing
cool.
now.
Like the Texas bar, how like Winston Churchill would have his like Sunday morning
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that.
like addresses. Like Pablo Sunday.
hey, your bars are due.
Your bar dues are due.
That's gonna be I'll record your greeting. Oh, you reached the law office of Ef'n. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
You know? That's what I'll do. Make some money for the bar that way, guys.
What I have a random I guess why did you want to become a lawyer in the first place? Because you said you really didn't grow up around that or anybody who was maybe a lawyer.
You know, if you look at my personal statement, it really is because at remember like 8 or 9 years of age, having to get the letters from the immigration attorneys as my parents were trying to adjust their status and having to translate for them. You know, and I'm like, what does this guy know that others don't? Trying to get out the new house and the real estate attorney. You know, what does this guy know that other folks don't? And it got me interested, you know, like, and I honestly, once I got to like college, the intellectual pursuit, like you don't stop, you know, you kind of want to build upon it is what I think I found it pretty attractive. It sounds maybe corny, I don't know about you all, but it really is that. It's because, I mean, early on I knew that somehow the profession provided access to something that people didn't have access to. But then later on, it was the ability to kind of be able to expand upon what you learn and do better.
It sounds like you went into your undergrad degree knowing that you wanted to be a lawyer. Is that correct?
That, although my mom, and I love her heart, she's like, pero mijo, what are you going to do? There's a closed captioning for that, but son, vas a representar a criminales, you're going to represent criminals, you know, and she didn't know any better. So for a while, you know, I was like the high school math champ. So I thought about engineering, architecture, but I'd always kind of leaned back towards the philosophy, poli-sci stuff. And yeah, I kind of was attracted to it. And by the end of my third year in undergrad, I knew I wanted to do that. But even my professors wanted me to teach, you know, poli-sci, and I was like, no, do law school.
You also said something earlier. You said, you know, I could have majored in philosophy, but I needed to get into law school. What did you think that you couldn't get into law school if you majored in philosophy?
Yes, that's exactly
That's
what
exactly.
he thought. Just
Tell him why he's wrong, Sonny.
Anyone who
I'm asking.
Everyone
I want to know what he thinks about
everyone
it.
looks down on people that have
I have
philosophy,
a philosophy
degrees.
degree.
That's exactly why.
I'm curious.
that
I'm
question
curious.
was
I have a
not
philosophy
a-
degree.
Man, I need your vote. So on May 1st, ask me again, and then I'll tell you the truth.
I'm not knocking it at all.
Just kidding. No, I loved it. I would have done it, but I had to get moving. I had to make some money. You know.
Oh,
honestly,
you mean
know.
you
It
mean-
wasn't about not wanting to do it. It's just like I couldn't add more hours, you know, or semesters.
I thought you meant when you
okay.
were first choosing
sorry.
your major and choosing you were choosing between philosophy and poli-sci, and you picked poli-sci. You're saying later on down the road you would have liked to have picked up a second major of philosophy, but you needed to get down the road to law
Well, I
school
mean,
already.
it's one of your basics you take, and then when I took that,
Intro.
and then I found Dr. David Carter, who passed away, and anybody who's ever taken philosophy at UTPA, would there are a bunch of us Carterites out there that love just his teaching style. And so I took so many classes that I actually could have done a double major.
Cool.
That's what I was going to, but I just couldn't. After 5 years and semesters, I have to move on, go somewhere else.
Okay.
You had me until you started talking about philosophy. I took philosophy in undergrad. I hated it. I didn't get it. It wasn't for me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what. Well,
Sonny's like, that's what stupid people say.
No, not at all. I didn't understand it, and I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I was good at math, but I was terrible at reading and writing, and I knew that if I wanted to be a lawyer, I was going to have to get pretty good at the reading and writing, right?
Yeah.
So I just doubled down on philosophy, and I just grit my teeth and got through it, and did pretty well.
Well, I mean, and
Got
most
into law
people that I
school.
knew that were philosophy majors, they did fairly well in law school. So there has to be something.
It's all writing.
But
I mean, literally always writing.
And I don't know if it was just a combination of just maybe the material or just like the person who taught it. It was a grad student who taught it, and I was not a fan.
It will be the person, honestly, I think. I mean, and well, there's some people that are actually, it's one side of the brain or the other that are more kind of like empirical, kind of based in numbers that do cover it perfectly there. They might not like the philosophy because you can argue about 2 + 2. What is that? And that's why people are like, no, I don't want to go there. And that's just not the way. And actually, when I was in law school, I was a teaching assistant. I used to tutor, first years. And I remember having engineer and liberal arts students, and I had to teach them differently because of that way. Okay, well, there's a philosophy or theory about the law and how this got to this point. But let me give it to you a bit more structured, for those that have the engineering, math kind of empirical way of doing things. So you must be highly intellectual and math based. So
Analytical.
Did y'all hear that?
yeah.
Analytical.
Well, Sonny, you bring up a really good segue.
Oh, here we go.
Like talking about philosophy. What's going to be your philosophy, Pablo, as like state bar president? What philosophy are you taking like into
I
office?
mean, to be serious, and it's there actually in front of you all. It's in writing. And actually, we're recording this, on the 24th, right? And 2 days from now, there's going to be an email blast to all 107,000 attorneys of the State Bar of Texas, and you'll see a similar message there. It's transparency and communication for the most part, honestly. I'm not a candidate that's going to come here and say to you all that we don't have this, we don't do that, and I'm here to change things. I'm like, what I've seen work, what I see as the best of our profession, I think can be highlighted through the State Bar and through leadership. I think there's a lot that our members want to say and kind of have to tell us, and I want to kind of take that and move it forward. I think my experience, more than I think past candidates, not just even my opponent of this year, but even past candidates, my experience I can take what you want as far as an idea and move it forward and tell you, we got to get here through these means, right? And I want to do that for the membership because I think there's a lot that, we can learn from our members and take forward. So it is transparency, it's communication, it's innovation and ideas. One of the examples that I give in there you've probably seen some of the writing says that we have currently a discussion about parental leave rule, where an automatic rule would kick in if you adopt or a child is born in your household to allow for continuances. That's when the ABA model is being discussed at the Supreme Court. And as parents, you realize that that's just helpful. I don't know how my wife did it, having two girls, and she works at Legal Aid, and she's an amazing attorney, and she had to take some time off, and then come back, and it's difficult for a parent, male or female, when to do that. And so the State Bar of Texas didn't stay behind in that. Went in the forefront, looked into the rules, and got input and application of that and moved forward. Disaster assistance, something that my wife is an expert on, that I want to do. One of the ideas that I want to do, for example, is to, there is a plan for disaster recovery for the State Bar employees, that you follow. There is a pro bono model that we follow that we do, for you to recruit your assistants as attorneys. I'm talking about legal aid, so we can help our residents that are affected by a flood or by a hurricane or otherwise. But we don't have something for you all as attorneys. So you can go somewhere, and say, okay, my courthouse is closed today because of this. When is it going to be reopened? Are my deadlines extended or not? All that is not anywhere. You update your profile every time you change, move somewhere, right? That's easily done, by going online at texasbar.com. Why not have an option in there you can click as to an alternative communication site if you happen to be, kept out of your office because of a disaster assistance, where it can tell people where you're going to be. Things like that I think would help our members, because then I can do the pro bono ask of you all if our members are taken care of. And those are some of the initiatives, that we talk about that we want to put forth. And I think I've learned from my experiences in working with different people.
Wow.
One of the other things I saw in here that regards mental illness and depression among lawyers, which I think is a huge topic, because I feel like every week, maybe every other week, we're seeing a post about another attorney who committed suicide. What exactly does it look like now with regard to assistance for attorneys who suffer from either alcoholism or substance abuse or mental illness? And what do you think needs to get better about it?
There's different fronts, but the one that's glaring that you all should know about is Texas Lawyers Assistance Program. That's a great program started by the bar. Excuse me. Where you can drank too much water too fast there, but when you can drink, when you can call and report somebody anonymously, if you will, for what you think might be an issue of depression or substance abuse or otherwise. And you might be able to see it. And you'll go to the courthouse and you see somebody that's just not the usual selves, just a little quieter, reserved. You haven't seen them around. You might smell alcohol in their breath and you wonder about that. And it's 8 o'clock in the morning before they go to a docket call, or you're just worried about that colleague that you don't see around anymore. You can give a call to TLAP and they'll give them a call on the check, wellness check or otherwise. It's voluntary, so they say, no, thank you, I'm okay. You can't do much about it, but otherwise they'll provide them a licensed professional counselor and some assistance and maybe some benefits to be able, if their health insurance doesn't provide, for some assistance, maybe provide for something for them, peers or other mentors that can come and kind of take them out of that, state.
Doesn't that assistant, I'm sorry to cut you off, doesn't that assistance also include, I thought I had read something about if, they're in dire straits and they need a sabbatical or some sort to get everything together, they provide someone to take over their docket or help them with their cases? It
is possible. What might have happened there, and one of the things that I did in the past, and I can speak this with some experience, is I was the chair of the Commission for Lawyer Discipline, and that's a 6-year term that I did. 1 year chair, 6 years served on that, and that is the body that sits together with the disciplinary council, the prosecutors, and looks over the more serious matters that have to be grieved, and deal with the license of an attorney. More often than not, we had a substance abuse or mental health issue involved that was treated or wasn't treated. More so wasn't treated, that it caused them problems in the office. And more often than not, when you saw it identified and you saw the cry for help, you would refer that case over to what's called the grievance referral program, or even TLAP, where you tell the attorney, you need maybe some management skills, maybe a sabbatical, maybe a custodian can come over and take over some of your cases for a while, or your own colleagues can do it and help you for a while you kind of recover from these matters and keeping it confidential. The grievance referral program is staffed by both an attorney and licensed counselor. So you would have that kind of assistance if you're within the disciplinary system. And that sort of model responds to the problem by the state bar, because instead of just kind of being punitive and just kind of taking your license away and making it even worse, it was a way to kind of like, let's take you out of here. And from that, we've learned, maybe when somebody gives a call and before you fall into that issue or disciplinary matter, how can we help you law practice management wise, your colleagues, your bar.
Yeah.
And there are people in this that step in and help out.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Pablo, but what's your stance on lawyer advertising?
What about it?
Like, is there any type of reform?
There is right now. There's a discussion going on advertisement review. And you look at the Commission for Disciplinary Rule and Referendum. They've got proposals that are going to go to the Rules Committee about advertisement. I think our rules need some updating. Because just our social media presence, online presence, your Facebook posts, are those meeting the requirements or not? You need to have a quick response, because messaging kind of moves pretty fast, and it's not just billboards and a phone book anymore. I think we need to update it. What I think a proper leader should do is not tell you, here's what you need to have as a result, or like, here's what's going to happen as a rule. I think a better leader would tell you, we need input from you all to make this better, and then move it forward. And I can tell you how I can move that forward. So, the Commission for Disciplinary Rule and Referendum, CDRR, is a result of the discussion of the sunset review that happened a couple of years ago. The chair of the Commission for Lawyer Discipline was yours truly. So we were actually have hearings before, in Austin about those issues and about the reforms for that. A few years ago, when the referendum or rules revision was tried, I was chair of the board back then. So this is the only time you ever had a candidate that's had that kind of experience in disciplinary matters. You've never had that before. And what I've learned from that is that you don't do a top-down approach and tell people, like, this is what you should have, what the rules should be. It's like, okay, what do we need? What is the profession feeling? Get input, and then move on up from that. So to respond to yours, we need to update the rule as to what that should be. I think we need to hear from the small firm, from the big firm, the multi-jurisdictional ones, we need to get input and then update it.
And I know that there's some talk about allowing like lawyers to use trade names.
Yeah.
If there was a trade name rule, what would be your trade name, Pablo?
Well, I think you have it already on the website, man. I'm on Wikipedia. I'm on Wikipedia. That would be mine. The Wiki Lawyer. The Wiki Lawyer. The Wiki Lawyer. Yeah, I go to Wikipedia for all my law. That's where I get on.
That's mine.
Is that what it is? Yeah, my clients are going to love that. You charge how much per hour for that?
Wiki Lawyer. And are you still...
By the way, there is a lawsuit about the trade names right now being filed against the disciplinary council. Yeah, and people should know about that as attorneys, because it's a big deal. Right now, we don't allow for that. You have to have the law firm's names, the people who are involved. No misleading information about that. And you probably want to follow that discussion going on.
I know, like someone's like, he said he was the law hawk. I thought he was an actual hawk. Guy can't even fly.
I hope people who are listening understand your humor.
I didn't know, man. Brian Longcar and the strong arm and all those kind of
those are all just terms and slogans, but but
they're not trade names, right?
But it's like attorneys should be able to get on social media if a storm hits and they happen to do hail cases. Hey, you just got hit by a storm. You should probably want to file a claim, and if you get denied, come see me. That's technically considered an advertisement, but why shouldn't that lawyer be allowed to post something like that without having it reviewed by the state bar if something's so quick and simple. I get it if it's I specialize in this and this is predominantly what we do. Yeah, you're probably overstepping. But it's tough because there's been times when I wanted to post something on Facebook regarding certain incident and like, no, I think that's an advertising. I don't really know if I'm breaking the rules if I post something.
Right. I mean, and pervasive in this, not only the trade names issue, which is, I think that what you don't want in trade names is a misleading issue, right?
Right.
And then what you're talking about too, we know now when you go start Googling, you get so many results, so many things. Like, how do you narrow it down? Where do you go? Can't even imagine how somebody who was like not an attorney and they need some help, where can they go? So what I think is pervasive in this is just client protection. You don't want to have them be misleaded somewhere that's going to take advantage of them.
Yeah, because the issue is not somebody like you that does the post, because you're going to say, hey, you should probably do it like this.
Someone who's not a lawyer.
But
Right.
Yeah.
exactly.
I
Somebody who's
saw-
going to say, oh, I'm specialized in this. You should come and see me, blah, 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 that type of deal.
I did see something really suspect on Facebook, and I won't say the name of
Was it
but
Efrain's?
No, it was the person is a non-lawyer, but he's got the scales of justice on his office door, and really he's a process server.
Oh yeah, the old notary stamp, notary
But
public.
they can help with all kinds of stuff that sound legal.
Yeah.
So
That's not the right practice of law committee, and that's actually a big problem.
Yeah.
for our client community too.
You see, Pablo, I really need like this trade name thing to pass
Yeah.
because my first name is Efrain.
Okay.
Do you know how many people can't pronounce that name? So when I pop up on Google, they're like, I can't even pronounce this
So
name.
they just skip right over.
Next person. Pablo.
Almaguer, because Almaguer is so much easier.
Pablo Almaguer.
Sure. Ooh, he sounds French.
Yeah, because
Sounds French.
French.
There's only like one. Yeah, y'all mentioned like the one French legal term as voir dire. I mean, that's all it is. But it's funny. I'll tell you one story, and like partly true. In law school, y'all know, right? When you sit down, you got like names. As to when you're being called out in first year course. You can imagine in Chicago when somebody looked down and was like, no, let's go to Smith. Like the next one, because they were not going to try, man. So it helped me a couple of times, but then after a while, it's like, no, Pablo Almaguer, whatever it is, come on, you're up next.
We had the big stadium seating, and we had the contracts professor that everyone just absolutely was terrified of,
The hitman.
Yeah,
the one that knew.
yeah. And so, man, everyone was so scared of him. And I remember sitting there, and I don't know why, but I knew the answer to this question right off the top of my tip of my tongue, and he asked it, and I blurted it out. I don't remember what it was, but I blurted it out. He didn't call me. He goes, "Yeah, who was it?" And he turned around and he points right at me. He knew it was me, and I looked at him, and I didn't want to. And I literally turned around and looked at the guy back of me, and I went like that. And he goes, "Oh no, that was you, buddy." And so I had accidentally volunteered. I think I was delirious from a little lack of sleep, and
Oh, gee. No, I never did that. We had one professor. Do you remember? Did you ever have Cochran? He was one of the deans. He had playing cards with our picture on it. And so he would come in
awful.
and he would shuffle them, and you could just it was just like the worst sound ever. And then he would just do like
a
real
Tarantino
slow,
movie, man.
Yes.
It's like,
and then
yeah.
it'd be like, Miss Muñiz. And I'm just like, oh God, he's talking to me. It was the worst. I hated it. Now it's like somebody calls on you in court and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm going to get yelled at. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. It's okay. But in law school, it was just, I don't know why. It bothered me so much. I mean, everybody felt that way, but.
yeah.
I never got called on in law school.
If I can't say it,
You're like,
Did you volunteer? Did you participate?
The only time I ever got called on was in criminal law class, and I was wearing these big, like baggy jeans.
Of course, you were a
And-
criminal.
of course you were.
And the professor said, "Stand up, Mr. Molina." And I go,
your
"Yes,"
client,
because
ladies and gentlemen.
How do you keep him out of jail?
it was something like that. He's like, "This is probable cause." Are you
serious?
I'm like, "What probable cause?" I go, "What is he talking about?" So I'm like,
'Cause you're
But
not
That
white.
sounds like criminal law
No,
too, though. That's
I was-
procedure.
I was wearing like big baggy pants and stuff. It was early in the morning, so I was like, probable cause. I'm like, it didn't click until like I was at home, like with Pam, and I'm like, hey Pam, the coolest thing happened today. The professor stood me up and said I looked like probable cause. She's like, you're an idiot. It's not a.
That's not a compliment.
It's reasonable suspicious, though.
I know.
I was like,
Reasonable suspicion at best.
Yeah.
I was
You
like,
you
oh, well.
really, I can't believe you never got called. That's amazing.
No. But I think
But then you probably spent like years just like kind of like
just
like
on the
really
edge.
nervous.
Yeah.
Like wondering what's
That's
gonna
the
happen.
worst part.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it
I
just
think it's my name.
When
the
is it gonna happen?
anticipation is just that was terrible.
was the name. So the election for state bar presidents win.
The whole month of April, you're gonna get. You all must have, any attorney here listening would have got it. The judicial poll email. It's very similar. It's the same vendor. You want to check your spam software on April 1st to make sure, and it's not a joke.
I was
You're
like,
gonna
is
actually
this
get
a
to
joke?
vote, yeah, and you're gonna actually be able to log in with a VAN number, I think it's called. And you go into the website and you vote. But you also get a mail-in ballot. I think I know the majority of folks now vote by electronic or website, but you also get that ballot if you want to mail it in. It's the whole month of April. April 30th it ends, and by about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, you will know the results.
Wow. And although you're from here, you've been traveling across
Yeah.
the state of Texas, right?
All over. Just last week, I was it last week? I have no idea sometimes where I wake up and what day it is, but I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was in East Texas. I hadn't been in Tyler in a while. It was Longview, Marshall, Tyler. Went into Austin. Tomorrow I'm flying to Fort Worth and then going to go over to Austin. But yeah, like 40 some visits. And I think if you go to the website, you'll see I put in there all the cities I've been to. I've yet to go to Waco and Lubbock, but otherwise I think almost everywhere. The second week of March, let me tell you what's going to happen. Like on Tuesday, we had an invitation for the El Paso Bar, and my opponent and I. We go to the El Paso Bar Association on Tuesday. We go to Lubbock on Wednesday, and then Amarillo on Thursday. So that's going to be boom, boom, boom. Yeah, and that's kind of common. It used to be you only had the month of March for campaigning. You were selected like in February or so, and you would never be home. And like Eduardo Rodriguez, who was our last president from the Valley and the last Latino, he'll tell you I was home twice, maybe that month, and that's it. Now you're selected pretty early on because there's this thing called petition candidate, and people were kind of pursuing those in September. A certain amount of signatures to get you on the ballot as opposed to being selected. And so they moved that selection process over by the board to match that. And so now basically like in September, October, you can start campaigning. And my opponent and I, we agree we're going to have a little different campaign than years past. We're going to be robocalling and mass emailing you all at all times. But we did say if somebody called us, we would go there. And I was surprised that by the end of the year, I had about 30 visits before the calendar year finished. And right now, I think about 45. And they've all been places where like, you've got to come here, you've got to be there, and that's been exciting. Even in the, whether it be the small city in Longview, Marshall, or, visiting, our local folks here, or in the big firms. It's always been surprising to come in and say, 21-year legal aid attorney, and then you get the attention of people. Like, when does that happen? When does that happen? It's like, well, never, and then you have an engagement there. So it's a commonality. There's a lot more that actually ties us and binds us together that doesn't. And that's what I've realized from that campaigning.
So when you were talking about, I guess, your opponent, y'all talk about where y'all are going to go and y'all go to places together?
We haven't. We early on talked like just the kind of campaign we wanted to do.
Okay.
We talked, we're both, she's a Latina from El Paso from the border, and I'm Latino from the border. I don't think we wanted to run certain campaigns because we want to, at least I do, I want to open the door for people and leave it open. I don't want to close it behind me by doing something, outrageous. And so I think it was good for both of us to kind of talk. But we learned later on as we called people along the way for endorsements, they were like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I've been burned from past years. And slowly that kind of shifted away from that discussion, and there's been more participation. But we do our own visits, but if a bar association calls and the bar association wants both of us there, we'll call each other up and we'll try to set up at the same time and do the same visit.
Wow, that's really cool.
We try to.
And you guys travel like differently, right? Because for
We do.
some reason I just pictured you guys like carpooling or something like that.
No, we're not like Beto.
I
I was going to say, that's exactly who I
No.
was thinking of, like Beto
Pretty interesting,
O'Rourke.
No,
4-hour drive.
No, but poor Sylvia, I don't think she wants to be in a car.
Or
with
you
me.
see her car and you're like, I'm going to take the air out of her tire.
It's a
I'll
race.
see you in Lubbock.
Seriously, guys. Seriously, you're supposed to game me votes. Not just,
I'm kidding.
Probable cause
You
right
would.
there.
I'm like, you would never do that.
You
You
would-
would never do that.
Now, and
My
what-
son's my dad's a mechanic. I do something more than that. Spark plugs. Yeah.
And what have you been learning by, I guess, traveling across the state of Texas and talking to like different lawyers?
Several different things. On a statewide level, and I think I mentioned it to you, there's more that binds us together than actually separates. There are very similar concerns. For example, the El Paso attorney and the Texarkana Tyler attorney will talk about just like the geographical distancing from like trainings in CLE. As you all know, we need 15 hours of CLE every year to keep our license active. And for many of us, it's 2 flights away. It's a full day of travel just to get to like one of the major cities where the CLE happens. So a discussion about like a traveling CLE show or something better, more accessible, for attorneys. And that's happening. And I think when people say it to me, they're like, this must be specific to us. Like, no, it's not. Actually, it happens in many different places. We should do something about that. But another aspect that I found, the legal aid support is amazing. I mean, I wish that my colleagues who do this for a living at legal aid would be there to see the reaction, that they respect what we do so much, because we don't do it for the pay, and we sometimes think we're doing it, nobody's noticing it, but everybody appreciates that, the legal aid service. But the other aspect locally, I can tell you, the amount of people that have a tie to the Valley is amazing. The presiding judge, Peter Sakai in San Antonio, is a McAllen Mike High graduate. He asked me when he found out that I was a PSJ graduate. His good friend, Tim Simpson, in Tyler, Texas, asked me about him when I visited in both places. And I actually got them together, they hadn't talked in a while.
Oh, wow.
The president of the Amarillo Bar Association used to be our board member down here, too. So, I mean, there's the El Paso State Senator, Jose Rodriguez, is from the area, from the Valley, started at Legal Aid, now is over there. I mean, all of that, it's amazing to see the small community that we are and how there's a big tie to the Valley. That's exciting. I like that part of it.
And I heard a story. I'm not sure if it's true or if it's just
Is
a
it on
rumor.
Wikipedia? If it is,
It's not on Wikipedia.
Then
I
it's
think
not
it should be if it's true.
You could probably message them and have them update
Right?
it. Yeah.
Is it true that you met with John Grisham?
Yeah, there's a photo on my Facebook page.
And did you get his autograph, or did he ask for yours? What?
Yeah, well,
What transpired there?
It was a really cool thing. No, I mean, it was not as cool as meeting Sonia Sotomayor, but it was cool to meet him, because the person that invited him, the Access to Justice Foundation, had like a 35-year anniversary, I believe. I should know this, in Austin. And I wanted to support, and I showed up, but I happened to be, in the room where he was at. And the person who invited John Grisham is an author himself, Talmadge Boston, a Dallas attorney who has many books about baseball and otherwise, knows him as a friend. He probably, brought him down. And he was going to speak at this, event. And so I'm talking to another president, about the campaign early on. It was like about 6 months ago or so. And Talmadge was like, hey, come over here. I want you to meet John Grisham. And I thought it was going to be like a quick shake of the hand and move on. So I go over there, and Talmadge Boston from Dallas, big firm attorney, he's like, John, you want to meet this guy here? He's a legal aid attorney from the Valley. That's what he said. And John Grisham was like, just like stopped, looked over, and go, I was there 2 weeks ago with my wife. My wife actually is, they do deal with issues of hunger matters around the world. Mm-hmm. And they were visiting the camps in Bronzeville. Wow. And he knew about Pro Bar, he knew about Bronzeville, he knew about the camps, and he asked me all about them, about Catholic Charities, TRLA, and what we're doing. So we're having a great discussion, but then I realized that behind him was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and there was another, the chair of the Access to Justice Foundation, and they're all just kind of waiting, and also everybody thought was kind of looking at me, and I'm like, how do I get John Grisham to turn around and realize that I'm not the most important person here, that he's got to talk to these folks? But he was that interested in the discussion. He wanted to continue on, and it was surreal to realize that I'm talking to John Grisham. And mind you, my mother-in-law, her grandkids are my daughters, the only grandkids she has. I'm sure she thinks it's amazing what we do. She's never been prouder of me than when I got her a signed John Grisham book. She was like, this is it, Pablo. You are now part of the family.
You made it. You finally made it. You finally made it.
You okay, Pedro? No. She's amazing.
And you also met Justice Sotomayor?
Yes, that was when I was chair of the board of the State Bar of Texas. We went to DC on ABA days, and we, as apart from my job and as part of the chairmanship of the board, we advocate for funding for legal services. I can't do that through work, but I can do it through my state bar work. And it happened that time, you can actually have events at the Supreme Court, but we got to be hosted by a justice. And she hosted a few of us, or one of the organizations that I was kind of was a part of that, but it had a tie-in for legal services. And so there's this beautiful hall, in the Supreme Court, where you have these meetings, and she was the sponsor, if you will, and there she is. She walks in. And the same thing happened too. I've been the only legal aid attorney to ever serve on the board of directors of the State Bar of Texas. I'm the only legal aid attorney to ever run for this position. So, I'm kind of like in case of fire or in case of emergency. Boom,
Break
there's
glass.
legal aid right there. Yeah, here's legal aid. No, but it's good to see the support. There were folks around me who did the same thing too, like, come over here and let's meet her. And she's talking about, with other people from around the nation, and they mentioned that to her. Here's Pablo Almaguer, a legal aid attorney serving on the board of directors of the State Bar of Texas. And she just turned around and locked in and started asking about, legal services and the work that we do. And she just got it and knew it. And it was surreal again. Turned around, took a photo. I have it for my daughters to see, they know who she is. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And there's been Elizabeth Warren too, by the way. I got to meet her too.
Elizabeth Warren?
You know her?
What about Bernie? Have you met Bernie?
He doesn't like me. I don't know why.
What?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I never met him, but I'm sure I met him too. Bernie.
Oh, are they going to ask me if I ever met Madonna?
Funny thing.
Funny story about that.
Does Yuri count? It's kind of like the Mexican Madonna. It's like, that about a few days beforehand, I find out that the guest, like the person giving out the diplomas that I'm going to sit next for the 2 hours, the ceremony is Elizabeth Warren, because she's from Boston. It was a Boston school. So I sat next to her for 2 hours, and we talked about LSC and the school and other things. Incredibly, she's actually taught at U of H Law School, professor.
Oh,
there.
I think I did
She
know
did.
that.
She talked about Houston and talked about Texas.
Very cool.
That does not state my Democratic leaning. This is a nonpartisan race for state bar president.
That is
But
true.
This is true.
Because I also met
Disclaimer.
the Chief Justice, by the way.
Oh, you met the Chief
Roberts.
Justice.
Roberts?
Wow.
But that's a lot of talk. You all got to.
Yeah, you didn't want to talk about Roberts, though.
I do. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. The Fifth Circuit Judicial Conference. I was in the elevator with my girl Paloma, and she was tiny. She was like, a few months old, grabbing on, and my wife was next to me, and then like two big burly guys with badges come in, and so my wife and I kind of go to the corner of the elevator each, right? And there comes the Chief Justice. It was actually his, I think his federal marshals, and he steps in, and I'm like, I think I know this guy. And I go, Chief Justice Roberts. And he goes, yeah. And shake his hand. We talk a little bit, on the elevator ride. And Paloma looks over, my daughter. And then I said, shake his hand. He's like, are you sure she's not going to fall? I'm like, nah, she's grabbing on pretty well. I mean, don't worry about it.
You're like,
Yeah.
Don't worry about her.
She's all good. She had a little taco in her hand. She's kind of like, don't worry. She wanted her to taco more than anything. But yeah, I mean, really personal, nice guy. I mean, kind of average guy. Nothing. When you realize that the status of this man, because there's only been a few in the history of the U.S.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah. And did you ask him, hey, if there's ever a vacancy,
Yeah, to put me in there.
keep my,
throw me in.
Like 20,
Pablo?
21 years legal aid. I've got a lot of experience.
I do a lot for almost nothing. I mean, I can definitely take the spot of two. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that. No. I would have probably gotten me arrested. That would have been a problem. I was trying to get a job, a job on the elevator. Those marshals were already looking at me.
Oh, they were.
Keep an eye on this guy with a baby. Is that his baby?
Yeah. I know that face that does not match that voice. That's probably what they were thinking.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, the face just doesn't match the voice. So. Pablo, so voting is the whole month
Of April.
of April. And we wish you luck on your race and safe travels clear across Texas.
Vote for Pablo.
I'm undecided. I'm just kidding.
You know what? So am I now.
No. You had me when you said you thought I was under 35. I already voted online.
I thought the voice did it, but I mean, yeah.
Well, it was both.
And the voice,
it was
yeah.
a little bit of
Gotta
both.
check my spam mail tomorrow.
Yeah, Pablo.
Thank you.
Win or lose, I hope we can have you back on the show sometime to talk about
Pro bono work. Or,
pro bono work or we have a lot more questions to ask you.
You have a lot of paraphernalia from the 80s here, and you were probably born in the 80s.
We were born in the 80s.
I grew
By
up
the
in
early
the
80s.
Yeah, so no, I was in full high school. Yeah, the Ghostbusters little capture deal there is right there.
Yeah.
There's
Plasma deal.
there's an old ghost in there.
Yeah.
That's what
Everywhere in the valley, man.
We
That's
were
such a
talking-
valley. Is that a Bocasio ghost? Is that
Bocasio ghost.
Bocasio ghost?
By any chance, did you see our Bocasio episode?
No. I saw that y'all posted it, but I haven't because I'm kind of scared.
Oh my God.
Hey man, I
don't
lived
be.
through that.
It was debunked.
Did you?
I met the woman who was the woman next to the other lady who smelled the sulfur.
I was like, you couldn't have been around during the Bocasio time.
Nah, but you hear about that. Yeah.
Well, my mom was the person who was on the episode. She used to DJ at Bocasio.
You serious?
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
You should run for political office based on that right there.
Just right.
The
Just
Bocasio
here.
Queen.
My mom used to be the DJ at Bocasio, so y'all should vote for me.
I survived
And
Bocasio.
my dad used to run security there.
Really? Is that how they met?
Well, they met through a mutual friend, but from there, yeah.
Man, you know how many people are going to like Google Bocasio now after this episode?
Wikipedia page. Got one.
I did want to say thank you though for inviting me. One thing I think I told Efrain, but not others, is that never in the past has a candidate ever had this kind of social media presence, and I kind of created all those. But I also am going to add a podcast soon. So thank you for doing this, because I think it's going to give me a little bit of a different platform and hopefully a different audience of folks that might not normally vote in these elections.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, you're dealing with a state bar like demographic that's aging out, and a lot of young lawyers. No, it's true.
Yeah,
No, you have
10%.
you have
It's
new
true.
lawyers all the time, all the
No,
time.
I mean, it's a problem that the bar's like facing, like with technology. When you see the like trials, you don't see the use of a lot of technology in terms of the Facebook page, like for the state bar. Yeah, I think it needs some.
Oh, you want me to do that? Oh, so not dues, not CLE. Take care of the Facebook
Take
side.
care of
Yeah,
Facebook.
take care of the state bar Facebook.
I'm going to put Pablo all over it, man. It needs more Pablo. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, love millennials. Well, thank you, Pablo. It's
Thank
been
you,
a
Pablo.
pleasure.
Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you all. It's been a pleasure, guys.